Fancy car for black girls like you. Where'd you get the cash for this, huh? Officer Hank Riley sneered, his flashlight glaring into Layla and Lena Johnson's eyes as they stood beside their SUV on a lonely Willow Creek road. The twins, their radiant brown skin shining defiantly, long black curls swaying in the night breeze, burned with fury at the racist jab and probing questions. The venomous words from two corrupt cops marked the start of a harrowing ordeal of false arrests and deadly threats. Yet these officers were clueless that they'd targeted federal prosecutors, women poised to topple their corrupt empire. This saga of courage, betrayal, and justice turned a town upside down. Drop a comment with where and when you're watching and hit subscribe. Tomorrow's tale is unmissable, and you'll be hooked to see how this unfolds. The neon glow of Willow Creek's fading streetlights danced across the windshield of the sleek black SUV as it hummed along the quiet back roads of South Carolina. It was a Friday evening in late summer, the air thick with the scent of magnolias and distant rain. Behind the wheel sat Lila Johnson, her radiant brown skin catching the subtle hues of the dashboard lights, her long black curls cascading freely over her shoulders, the ends slightly wavy like gentle ocean waves. At 32, she was the elder twin by mere minutes, but she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had spent years dismantling corruption in federal courtrooms. Her sister Lena lounged in the passenger seat, mirroring her almost perfectly. Same luminous complexion, same ebony tresses bouncing with every bump in the road. They were federal prosecutors, sharp-minded warriors in tailored suits, fighting for justice in a system that often felt rigged against people who looked like them. Lila glanced at Lena, a smile tugging at her full lips. "Can you believe we nailed that case today? That CEO thought his money could buy silence, but we buried him with those emails." Her voice was smooth, laced with the satisfaction of victory. Lena laughed, a rich, melodic sound that filled the car. "Girl, the look on his face when you dropped that bombshell evidence? Priceless. We're unstoppable, sis." They high-fived, their hands meeting with a familiar slap that spoke of unbreakable bonds forged in childhood adversity. Growing up in a small southern town where their intelligence was often dismissed because of their skin color. Tonight, though, the world felt right. The radio played a soft R&B track, and the sisters sang along, their voices harmonizing effortlessly as the SUV cruised at a steady 45 minutes. Suddenly, a flash of red and blue pierced the rearview mirror. Lila's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "What now?" she muttered, pulling over to the gravel shoulder. The patrol car screeched to a halt behind them, its headlights blinding. Lena straightened, her eyes narrowing. "Probably nothing. Just stay cool." But a knot formed in her stomach, an instinct honed from too many stories of traffic stops gone wrong for black folks in America. Two figures emerged from the cruiser, their silhouettes bulky under the harsh beams. Officer Hank Riley waddled forward first, his paunch straining against his uniform shirt, his face a mask of perpetual scowl, jowls heavy, eyes small and mean like a bulldog's. Beside him lumbered Officer Bud Carson, equally rotund, with a mustache that curled into a sneer, and cheeks flushed from what smelled like cheap whiskey even from a distance. They were the kind of men who wielded badges like weapons, their authority laced with the poison of old prejudices. Hank rapped on the driver's window with his knuckles, motioning for Lila to roll it down. She complied, keeping her hands visible on the wheel, a habit drilled into her since she was old enough to drive. "Evening, officers. Is there a problem?" Hank leaned in, his breath reeking of stale coffee and entitlement. He shone his flashlight directly into Lila's eyes, then Lena's, lingering a beat too long on their figures. "License and registration," he barked, ignoring her question. Lila reached slowly for the glove compartment, her heart pounding not from fear, but from the simmering rage of being treated like a suspect for existing. She handed over the documents, her voice steady. "Here you go. May I ask why you pulled us over?" Bud chuckled from the passenger side, circling the SUV like a shark. "Tail lights out. But damn, look at this ride. Fancy car for black girls like you. Where'd you get the cash for this, huh?" His words landed like a gut punch, dripping with condescension and the unspoken accusation that they couldn't possibly afford it legitimately. Lena's jaw clenched, her nails digging into her palms. She felt the familiar burn of humiliation, the way it twisted in her chest like a knife. Memories of schoolyard taunts, job interviews where her qualifications were questioned because of her hue, but she bit back her retort, knowing escalation could turn deadly. Lila forced a polite smile, though her eyes flashed with defiance. "It's our car, officer. We work hard for what we have. The tail light was fine when we left the office." Hank snatched the papers, scanning them with exaggerated suspicion. "Work hard? In what? A nail salon? Or maybe something shadier?" He laughed, a guttural sound that echoed Bud's earlier chuckle. The sisters exchanged a glance. Lena's eyes wide with restrained fury, Lila's narrowing in calculation. They were no strangers to the script, the casual racism wrapped in authority, designed to provoke and demean. Bud tapped the hood, peering inside as if he owned it. "Step out of the vehicle, both of you. Routine check." Lila hesitated. "Is that necessary? We've complied with everything." Hank's face hardened, his hand drifting to his belt. "You questioning me? Get out or we'll make you." The command hung heavy, laced with threat. Lena unbuckled first, stepping out into the cool night air, her heels crunching on gravel. Leela followed, standing tall beside her sister, their postures mirroring each other, shoulders back, chins high. The wind caught their curls, sending them dancing like dark flames. As they stood there exposed under the patrol lights, Hank circled them slowly, his gaze invasive. "Look at you two. Twins, huh? All dressed up like you think you're somebody. Bet you got something to hide in that fancy trunk." Bud joined in, his voice mocking. "Yeah, probably boosting clothes or worse. People like you always do." The words stung, but Lila felt a spark of resolve ignite amid the anger. She thought of their courtroom battles, where they turned the tables on the powerful. "Officers, this is harassment. We know our rights," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the night. Hank stopped in front of her, so close she could see the veins in his reddened eyes. "Rights? In my town, I decide the rights." He motioned to Bud. "Pop the trunk. Let's see what these girls are really about." Bud complied, rummaging roughly through their belongings. Briefcases filled with legal files, a gym bag, nothing incriminating. But his grin widened as he discovered something planted, a small suspicious baggie tucked under a seat. "Well, well, what's this? Looks like powder to me." Lena's blood boiled. "That's not ours. You must have—" But Hank cut her off with a wave. "Save it for the judge, sweetheart, or maybe we can work something out right here." His implication hung vile in the air, turning Lena's stomach. Lila stepped forward protectively, her mind racing. This wasn't just a stop. It was a setup. The fear crept in now, mingling with the rage, a primal dread that whispered of headlines about suspicious circumstances in traffic encounters. As Bud slammed the trunk, Hank radioed for backup, his smirk victorious. The sisters stood frozen, the weight of injustice pressing down like the humid southern night. Little did these officers know that they had just ignited a firestorm. But for now, in this isolated stretch of road, Lila and Lena could only hold each other's gaze, drawing strength from their unbreakable bond as the nightmare began to unfold. The gravel crunched under Officer Hank Riley's boots like brittle bones as he stared at the small plastic baggie Bud Carson had discovered in the trunk of the SUV. The powdery white substance inside gleamed mockingly under the patrol car's headlights, a blatant plant if Lila Johnson had ever seen one. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not just from the shock, but from the raw, visceral anger that surged through her veins like wildfire. Beside her, Lena stood rigid, her long black curls framing a face etched with fury, her radiant brown skin flushed under the artificial glare. They were federal prosecutors, damn it. Women who had stared down mob bosses and corporate crooks in marble courtrooms. But here, on this desolate stretch of Willow Creek Road, they were reduced to suspects in a rigged game. "That's not ours." Lila's voice sliced through the night, sharp and unyielding, though she kept her hands visible, palms up in a gesture of compliance she'd learned from too many cautionary tales. "You planted that. This is entrapment." Her mind raced, cataloging every detail. The way Bud's gloved hand had lingered too long in the trunk, the smug twitch at the corner of Hank's mouth. She exchanged a fleeting glance with Lena, a silent pact forged in twin intuition. Stay calm, gather evidence, survive. Bud let out a low, guttural laugh, twirling the baggie like a trophy. Entrapment? Hear that, Hank? These girls watch too much TV. Nah, this here is probable cause for possession with intent. You're under arrest. His eyes raked over them again, lingering on their curves with a hunger that made Lena's stomach churn. She felt exposed, violated by the mere gaze, a reminder of every catcall and leer she'd endured growing up in the South, where her beauty was often weaponized against her. Hank stepped forward, his bulky frame casting a shadow that swallowed the sisters. Hands behind your backs, now. His tone brooked no argument, laced with the authority of a man who relished breaking spirits. Lila complied first, her wrists crossing at the small of her back, but Hank yanked them roughly, the cold metal of the cuffs biting into her skin like teeth. She winced, a sharp pain shooting up her arms, but bit her lip to stifle any sound. Weakness wasn't an option. Easy there, she said through gritted teeth. We're not resisting. Shut your mouth, Hank snarled, tightening the cuffs until they drew blood. He spun her around, shoving her against the SUV's door with enough force to knock the wind from her lungs. The metal was cool against her cheek, a stark contrast to the heat of humiliation flooding her body. Memories flooded back unbidden. Childhood taunts in the schoolyard. Go back to where you came from. The sting of being followed in stores because people like you were always suspects. Lila pushed them down, focusing on Lena, who was enduring the same from Bud. Bud grabbed Lena's arms with meaty hands, his fingers digging in like claws. Ooh, feisty one, aren't you? Bet you think you're hot stuff in those tight pants. He cuffed her wrists, pulling them higher than necessary, eliciting a gasp of pain. Lena's eyes blazed, her curls whipping as she turned her head. Get your hands off me, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. But Bud only laughed, pressing his body closer than needed, his breath hot on her neck. Or what? Gonna call your lawyer, Daddy? Nah, in Willow Creek, we handle things our way. The sisters were herded toward the patrol car like cattle, their heels scraping the gravel. Lila's mind whirled with legal precedents, Miranda rights, unlawful search and seizure, but voicing them now felt futile. Hank opened the back door, shoving Lila inside first. The vinyl seat was sticky and worn, reeking of old sweat and despair. Lena followed, sliding in beside her, their shoulders brushing in silent solidarity. The partition between front and back was a grimy plexiglass barrier, etched with scratches from previous detainees. As the car roared to life, Bud twisted in the passenger seat, his face illuminated by the dashboard glow. Comfy back there, ladies? Hope so, 'cause it's gonna be a long night. Hank chuckled, accelerating down the dark road, the SUV left abandoned like a crime scene. Yeah, we got ourselves a couple of prizes. Black twins with attitude, perfect for teaching a lesson. His words dripped with malice, revealing the undercurrent of racism that fueled their actions. Lila caught Lena's eye in the dim light, a wordless message. We're in this together. Plan. The drive to the station twisted through shadowed back roads, the patrol car's sirens silent but its presence ominous. Hank and Bud bantered like old hunting buddies, their voices booming through the speaker. Remember that kid last month, Bud? The one with the fancy watch? Planted a little something in his backpack and bam, off the streets. Bud nodded, his double chin jiggling. Yeah, and the payout from the gang. Sweet. These two will fetch even more. The boys downtown hate uppity types moving in on their turf. Lila's ears perked up at that. Payout? Gang? It clicked. These weren't just bigoted cops. They were corrupt, on the take from local drug rings, targeting people of color to clean up neighborhoods for kickbacks. Her prosecutor's instincts kicked in, filing away every word as potential evidence. But the revelation only deepened her dread. If they were tied to organized crime, this stop wasn't random. It was a hit. Lena leaned closer, her voice a whisper barely audible over the engine. They're dirty, Lila. We have to stay sharp. Lila nodded, her cuffs chafing as she shifted. The pain was a constant reminder of their vulnerability, but it fueled her resolve. She thought of their mother, a single parent who had drilled into them, never let them see you break. The sisters had risen from humble beginnings, scholarships to Ivy League law schools, top spots at the DOJ, defying every stereotype thrown their way. This was just another battle. Bud's voice interrupted their quiet exchange. Hey, back there, don't get any ideas. We could pull over right now, have a little fun before the station, teach you some respect. His threat hung heavy, explicit, and chilling. Lena's breath hitched, a wave of nausea washing over her. The implication was clear: assault, hidden under the veil of authority. She remembered a high school incident, a white boy groping her at a party claiming exotic girls like her were asking for it. The shame had lingered for years, but it had also hardened her. "Touch us and you'll regret it," she shot back, her tone ice cold. Hank swerved slightly, laughing. Big words for a cuffed suspect. But hey, maybe we'll skip the fun and go straight to processing. Chief Wade loves fresh meat, especially when it comes with a side of silence money from the higher-ups. The casual admission of corruption sent a shiver down Lila's spine. Wade, the name rang a bell from a federal report on small-town graft. These men weren't isolated. They were part of a web, spinning threads of fear and extortion. The station loomed ahead, a squat brick building with flickering fluorescents and barbed wire fencing that screamed intimidation. Hank parked with a jolt, yanking open the door. "Out, and keep your mouths shut." He grabbed Lila's arm, his fingers bruising as he hauled her upright. Lena followed, stumbling slightly but catching herself. The night air was cooler now, carrying the faint scent of an impending storm, mirroring the turmoil in their souls. Inside, the lobby was a haze of yellow light and stale coffee. A bored desk sergeant glanced up, then away, complicit in his indifference. Hank and Bud shoved the sisters toward a holding area, their laughter echoing off the cinder block walls. "Book 'em for possession, resisting, whatever sticks," Hank ordered. As they were separated for processing, Lila caught Lena's eye one last time, a promise amid the chaos. "We'll fight this. Together." The cuffs came off briefly for fingerprints, but the emotional shackles remained. Lila felt the weight of centuries of injustice pressing down, but she straightened her spine, her curls falling defiantly over her shoulders. This wasn't the end. It was the spark. Unbeknownst to their captors, the Johnson twins were about to turn the tables in ways these corrupt fools could never imagine. The fluorescent lights of the Willow Creek police station buzzed like angry hornets, casting a sickly yellow pallor over the holding area where Lila and Lena Johnson were processed. The air was thick with the stench of disinfectant and despair, the kind that clung to the soul. Lila stood with her wrists still raw from the cuffs, her long black curls tangled from the rough handling, her radiant brown skin glistening with sweat under the harsh glare. Beside her, Lena mirrored her stance, shoulders squared, chin high, their identical beauty a silent defiance against the indignity of their situation. They were federal prosecutors, women who had toppled kingpins in courtrooms. Yet here they were, treated like common criminals in a town rotten with corruption. The desk sergeant, a wiry man with a permanent smirk, typed lazily at his computer, barely glancing at the sisters as Officer Hank Riley shoved their paperwork across the counter. "Possession with intent, resisting arrest, disorderly conduct," Hank rattled off, his bulldog face smug with triumph. "Make sure it sticks, Jerry." Bud Carson lounged against the wall, his meaty arms crossed, his mustache twitching with a cruel grin. "Yeah, these girls thought they could sass us. Time to learn their place." Lila's blood boiled, her pulse hammering in her ears. She wanted to scream, to hurl every legal statute she knew at these bigots, but she bit her tongue, knowing words alone wouldn't free them. Lena, however, couldn't resist. "This is a setup," she said, her voice low but razor-sharp. "You planted that baggie, and we'll prove it." Bud's laugh was a guttural bark. "Prove it from a cell, sweetheart. Nobody's listening to you here." As Jerry began the pat-down, Lena subtly shifted, letting her federal prosecutor's badge slip from her pocket. It hit the linoleum floor with a soft thud, the gold seal of the Department of Justice catching the light like a beacon. She stepped back, letting it lie there, unmistakable. "You might want to look at that," she said, her tone calm but laced with steel. Lila's eyes flicked to the badge, then to her sister, a calculated move. They'd played this game before, revealing their credentials to unsettle opponents. But this wasn't a courtroom, this was a lion's den. Hank stooped to retrieve the badge, his thick fingers turning it over. His eyes narrowed, then widened, before a harsh laugh erupted from his chest. "Well, ain't this cute? A fake DOJ badge? You girls really went all out." He tossed it to Bud, who caught it with a sneer. "Look at this, Hank. Probably bought it off the internet for $10. He held it up, mocking the seal, then snapped it in half with a deliberate crack. The sound hit Lena like a physical blow, her fists clenching as memories surged. Years of clawing their way through law school, facing sneers from professors who doubted their worth, only to have their hard-earned authority reduced to a cheap prop. Lila stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fire in her chest. "That badge is real. We're federal prosecutors with the U.S. Attorney's Office. You're making a serious mistake." Her words hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in truth. For a moment, the room stilled. Jerry paused his typing. Bud's smirk faltered, but Hank recovered quickly, his face darkening. "Prosecutors, huh? Then I'm the damn president." He leaned in close, his coffee-stained breath hot on Lila's face. "This is Willow Creek, not D.C. Your fancy titles don't mean shit here." The sisters exchanged a glance, their twin bond a lifeline in the chaos. They saw the same resolve in each other's eyes. These men weren't just racist, they were part of something bigger, a machine that crushed anyone who dared to challenge it. Lena's heart ached with the weight of betrayal, not just by these cops, but by a system that was supposed to protect them. She thought of their mother who'd marched in civil rights protests, whispering, "Never bow to bullies." They wouldn't bow now. Bud tossed the broken badge onto the desk, signaling to Jerry, "Lock them up separate. Let's see how tough these prosecutors are after a night in the tank." But before they could be marched away, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Chief Harlan Wade appeared, a tall, silver-haired man in his 50s, his crisp uniform a stark contrast to his cold, calculating eyes. His presence sucked the air from the room, his authority palpable. Hank straightened, almost deferential. "Chief, we got two troublemakers here claiming they're feds. Found some powder in their car." Wade's gaze swept over Lila and Lena, lingering on their disheveled suits and defiant postures. He picked up the broken badge, examining it with feigned curiosity before letting it clatter back to the desk. "Federal prosecutors, you say?" His voice was smooth, almost pleasant, but it carried a venom that made Lila's skin crawl. "Interesting. We get all kinds of outsiders passing through, thinking their credentials scare us. But in my town, paper doesn't talk. Power does." Lena's jaw tightened, her curls swaying as she tilted her head. "You're violating our rights, Chief. Unlawful detention, fabricated evidence. This won't hold up in court." Wade's smile was a thin, predatory line. "Court? Oh, honey, you're not making it to court. Paperwork gets lost here. People get lost here." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You think you're special because you've got a title? I've buried bigger fish than you." The words landed like a punch, stirring a deep primal fear in Lila. She thought of cases she'd prosecuted, whistleblowers silenced, witnesses vanishing. This wasn't just a small-town power trip. It was a glimpse into a web of corruption that stretched far beyond Willow Creek. Her mind raced, cataloging Wade's words, his smug certainty. They needed evidence. Allies, a way out. But for now, they were trapped. Hank grabbed Lila's arm, his fingers bruising as he steered her toward a cell. Bud did the same with Lena, his grip unnecessarily tight. "Move it, princesses," Hank growled. The sisters were led down a dim hallway, the clang of metal doors echoing like a death knell. Layla's heart pounded, but she drew strength from Lena's steady gaze across the corridor. They were separated into adjacent cells, the bars cold and unyielding. The locks clicked shut with a finality that made Lena's chest tighten. Alone in her cell, Lila sank onto the thin cot, her wrists throbbing, her suit stained with gravel dust. The humiliation burned hotter than the pain, being stripped of dignity, reduced to a stereotype by men who saw their badges as licenses to degrade. But beneath the anger, a spark of resolve flared. She thought of their courtroom victories, the lives they'd saved by exposing corruption. This was just another case, she told herself, albeit one played on the enemy's turf. Lena pressed her hands against the bars, her curls falling like a curtain around her face. She could still feel Bud's leering gaze, hear Wade's chilling threat. But she also heard their mother's voice. You're stronger than they know. They were federal prosecutors, not victims. These men had underestimated them, and that was their first mistake. As the station's lights flickered, casting long shadows across the concrete, Lila and Lena sat in silence, their minds already weaving a plan to turn this injustice into their greatest triumph. The Willow Creek police station's holding cells reeked of mildew and despair, the kind of stench that seeped into the soul. Lila Johnson sat on the edge of a thin metal cot, her wrists bruised purple from the cuffs, her tailored blazer torn at the shoulder. Her long black curls, once bobbing freely, clung to her sweat-dampened neck, but her radiant brown skin still glowed with defiance under the flickering fluorescent lights. Across the narrow corridor, Lena mirrored her posture in an identical cell, her eyes locked on the concrete floor, her curls a dark cascade framing a face taut with controlled fury. They were federal prosecutors, women who had unraveled empires of lies in courtrooms. Yet here they were, caged like animals in a town festering with corruption. The humiliation burned, but beneath it, a spark of hope flickered. They weren't done yet. The station was quiet now, save for the occasional creak of a chair or the distant ring of a phone. It was past midnight, and the air hung heavy with the weight of their predicament. Lila's fingers brushed the slim silver bracelet on her wrist, a gift from their mother that doubled as a DOJ-issued recording device. She hadn't declared it during processing, and the officers, sloppy in their arrogance, hadn't noticed. She glanced at Lena, who gave a subtle nod. They'd used this trick before in sting operations, capturing loose-lipped criminals who thought they were untouchable. Tonight, it might be their lifeline. Footsteps echoed down the hall, heavy and uneven. Hank Riley and Bud Carson appeared, their faces flushed from liquor, their uniforms unbuttoned at the collar. They dragged chairs to the center of the corridor, settling in with a bottle of cheap bourbon passed between them. Hank took a swig, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Man, those girls thought they were slick with that fake badge, he slurred, his bulldog jowls quivering with a laugh. Federal prosecutors, my ass. Just another pair of troublemakers we'll bury. Bud leaned back, his chair creaking under his bulk. Yeah, like that barber last year. Planted a little coke in his shop, and boom, out of business. Paid us $5,000 to keep his kid out of it. His mustache twitched with a grin. These twins, they'll fetch more. The crew downtown don't like black folks moving in on their deals. Lila's heart raced, her fingers inching toward the bracelet's hidden button. She pressed it, the tiny red light invisible in the dim cell. Every word was being recorded, crisp and clear, a digital noose tightening around these corrupt fools. Lena leaned against her cell's bars, her voice barely a whisper. Keep 'em talking, sis. She knew the drill, provoked just enough to draw out confessions without raising suspicion. Lila cleared her throat, loud enough to catch Hank's attention. You're proud of that, huh? Framing innocent people for profit? Her tone was sharp, a calculated jab to stoke their egos. Hank's head snapped toward her, his eyes narrowing. Innocent? Ain't nobody innocent in this town unless we say so. You think you're special 'cause you got a fancy car? We run Willow Creek. He took another gulp, the bourbon loosening his tongue further. Remember that preacher's daughter? Mouthy like you. Found a gun in her purse. Unregistered, of course. She's still doing time, and her daddy's church pays us monthly to stay quiet. Bud chuckled, his voice slurring. And the councilman last spring thought he could run for mayor. A little planted weed and he's out. Developers loved us for that one. Nice fat envelope. Lila's stomach churned, but she kept her expression neutral, her bracelet capturing every damning word. The scope of their corruption was staggering. Not just racist cops, but a machine fueled by bribes, targeting black and brown communities to keep them subdued for profit. The cell door rattled softly, interrupting the officer's boasts. A young woman appeared, her blonde hair tied in a tight bun, her police uniform crisp but her eyes betraying unease. Officer Jenny Hayes carried a tray of stale sandwiches and paper cups of water, her movements cautious. "Dinner," she announced loudly, her voice steady for any listening ears. But as she slid the tray through Lila's cell slot, her fingers brushed Lila's, slipping a folded scrap of paper into her palm. "Don't trust anyone here," Jenny whispered, so low it was almost inaudible. "They've done this before." Lila's heart skipped, hope surging like a tide. She palmed the note, keeping her face blank as Jenny moved to Lena's cell, repeating the routine. "Water fountain's broken, so cups'll have to do," Jenny said at normal volume, then dropped her voice to a breath. "Clarence Brooks, federal judge. His number's on the paper. Call him if you get a chance." Lena nodded slightly, her curls brushing the bars as she took the tray, her eyes conveying gratitude and caution. Jenny retreated, her footsteps fading, but her risk lingered in the air. Lila unfolded the note under her cot's thin blanket, her fingers trembling slightly. In neat handwriting was a phone number and the words, "Judge Brooks, emergency contact. He knows Wade's game." Clarence Brooks, a name they recognized from DOJ briefings, a veteran judge who'd quietly fought corruption for decades. Lila's chest swelled with a fragile hope, tempered by the reality of their isolation. They were in the belly of the beast, surrounded by enemies, but Jenny's courage was a crack in the machine's armor. Hank and Bud, oblivious, continued their drunken confessional. "Chief Wade's got the whole county in his pocket," Hank bragged, his voice louder now. "Judges, councilmen, even some feds. Why you think we're untouchable?" Bud nodded, spilling bourbon on his shirt. "Yeah, that last payout from the cartel? 10 grand just to look the other way. These girls are next. Nobody'll miss them." Lila's fingers tightened around the note, her mind racing. The bracelet's microchip was filling with gold. Names, dates, crimes. She thought of their mother, who taught them to memorize details under pressure, a skill honed in law school mock trials. Lena, in her cell, was doing the same, her memory a steel trap cataloging every word. But the physical pain was mounting. Lila's wrists throbbed, her shoulders ached from the earlier struggle, and the cold concrete floor seeped into her bones. The emotional toll was worse. The sting of being dehumanized, reduced to black girls in a system designed to crush them. Yet as the bourbon bottle emptied and Hank's boast grew sloppier, Lila felt a shift. These men thought they'd won, but their arrogance was their weakness. She met Lena's gaze through the bars, a silent vow passing between them. They'd use this evidence to burn this corrupt house down. Jenny's note was their lifeline, Brooks their potential savior. For now they played the part of broken captives, heads bowed, shoulders slumped, but their minds were alight with strategy. The storm was coming, and these officers had no idea they'd just handed the Johnson twins the thunder. The Willow Creek police station was a tomb of flickering lights and whispered cruelties, its concrete walls echoing with the weight of injustice. Lila Johnson sat hunched on her cell's cot, her radiant brown skin dulled by exhaustion, her long black curls matted against her neck from sweat and struggle. Her wrists, still raw from the cuffs, throbbed with every heartbeat, but her mind was a steel trap, replaying the damning confessions recorded by her DOJ-issued bracelet. Across the narrow corridor, Lena mirrored her sister's posture, her identical curls framing a face etched with fury and resolve. They were federal prosecutors, warriors of the courtroom. Yet here they were, caged in a corrupt town's belly, fighting not just for freedom, but for survival. The air was heavy with mildew and menace, but the sisters clung to a fragile hope, their evidence and a potential ally in Judge Clarence Brooks. The station was eerily quiet at 3 a.m., the only sounds the hum of fluorescence and the occasional snore from the drunk tank down the hall. Lila clutched the scrap of paper Jenny Hayes had slipped her, the number for Brooks scrawled in tight, urgent handwriting. A chance to reach the outside world came when a night guard, half asleep, left the booking area unattended. Jenny, her blonde bun fraying from stress, appeared like a ghost, her eyes darting nervously. 5 minutes, she whispered, unlocking Lila's cell just enough to slip her toward a dusty landline tucked behind a filing cabinet. "Make it quick. They're watching." Lila's fingers trembled as she dialed Victor Lang's direct line, her supervisor at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Lang had been their mentor, a grizzled veteran who'd praised their tenacity in dismantling corrupt networks. His voice, when he answered, was groggy but familiar. "Lang, who's this?" Lila hunched closer to the receiver, her voice low. "Sir, it's Lila Johnson. Lena and I are in trouble. We're detained in Willow Creek. False charges, planted evidence. We've got recordings of officers admitting to framing people, taking bribes. Chief Wade's running a racket here." The line crackled and Lang's tone shifted, sharp and cold. "Lila, where are you calling from?" Her stomach knotted at the edge in his voice. "The station, sir. We need help. These cops are dirty and we—" Lang cut her off, his words like ice. "I've already spoken to Chief Wade. He says you two caused a scene, resisted arrest, had drugs in your car." Lila's breath caught, disbelief crashing over her like a wave. "That's a lie. We have proof. Hours of confessions on tape." Lang's voice dropped lower, oily with self-preservation. "Listen carefully, Lila. Whatever you think you have, drop it. You're stirring up trouble you can't handle. Walk away while you still can." The betrayal hit like a sledgehammer. Lila's hand tightened around the phone, her knuckles whitening. Lena, eavesdropping from her cell, went rigid, her dark eyes wide with shock. Lang had been their rock, the man who'd pushed them through the DOJ's ranks despite pushback from old guard skeptics. Now his words revealed a traitor, bought by the same corruption they fought against. "You're covering for them," Lila whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "They're destroying lives, and you're helping them." Lang's reply was final, chilling. "Some fights aren't worth it, Agent Johnson. That's an order." The line went dead. Jenny hissed from the doorway. "Someone's coming." Lila barely made it back to her cell before heavy boots echoed down the hall. She sank onto her cot, the sting of Lang's betrayal sharper than the bruises on her wrists. Lena reached through the bars separating them, her fingers brushing Lila's in a fleeting gesture of comfort. "He's one of them," Lena murmured, her voice thick with disgust. "But we're not alone. We've got the recordings. Brooks, Jenny." Lila nodded, her resolve hardening like steel. They'd been betrayed before, by classmates, colleagues, systems, but never like this. Yet they'd survived worse. They would survive this. The station's silence shattered an hour later when Jenny slipped back, her face pale as moonlight. "It's bad," she whispered, her hands trembling as she passed a new note through the bars. "They torched my car in the lot, and Marcus Tate, the black driver who saw your stop, he's in the hospital, beaten half to death." Lila's heart sank, the note crumpling in her fist. Marcus, a delivery driver who'd lingered at the roadside, had promised to testify. Now he was another casualty of Wade's machine. "They're saying you two planned it," Jenny continued, her voice barely audible. "New charges, conspiracy, assault, maybe worse." Lena's curls swayed as she pressed against the bars, her eyes blazing. "We've been locked up. How could we plan anything?" Jenny shook her head, her bun unraveling further. "They've got fake witnesses, doctored logs. Wade's desperate to bury you before you talk." The words landed like blows, each one tightening the noose around the sisters. Lila's mind raced, piecing together the scope of the corruption. Wade's network wasn't just local. It had tentacles reaching into federal ranks, with Lang as proof. The bracelet's recordings, still hidden, were their only weapon, but getting them out was now a matter of life and death. Heavy footsteps announced Hank Riley's return, his bulldog face split by a cruel grin. Bud Carson trailed behind, his mustache twitching with glee. "Sleep well, ladies?" Hank taunted, jangling his keys. "Got news? You're being transferred tomorrow. Maximum security upstate. Can't have dangerous types like you in our cozy little jail." He leaned closer to Lila's cell, his breath reeking of bourbon. "And your little friend Marcus should have kept driving. Now he's learning what happens to snitches." Lena lunged at the bars, her fist clenched. "You're monsters," she spat, her voice shaking with fury. Bud laughed, his bulk blocking the light. "Monsters? Nah, we're just cleaning up Willow Creek. You two are just collateral." The threat was clear. The transfer wasn't about justice. It was a death sentence, a way to silence them permanently. Lila's heart pounded, but she forced her breathing to steady. She thought of their mother, her voice echoing, "Never let them break you?" They wouldn't. As Hank and Bud swaggered away, their laughter fading, Lila unfolded Jenny's note. It read, "Brooks is ready. Find a way to call. They're panicking." The words were a lifeline, a reminder that their fight wasn't over. Lena met her sister's gaze, their twin bond a silent vow. The betrayal had cut deep, and the danger was mounting, but the Johnson sisters were far from broken. The recordings burned a hole in Lila's bracelet, and with Brooks waiting, they had a chance to strike back. In the dim cell under the weight of a corrupt empire, they began to plan, their spirits unbowed, ready to turn this betrayal into their greatest weapon. The Willow Creek police station's holding cells were a suffocating cage, the air thick with the sour tang of fear and betrayal. Lila Johnson sat bolt upright on her cot, her radiant brown skin slick with sweat, her long black curls plastered to her shoulders from the humid night. Her wrists, bruised and scabbed from the cuffs, ached, but her mind was razor sharp, fueled by the sting of Victor Lang's betrayal and the damning confessions stored in her DOJ-issued bracelet. Across the corridor, Lena mirrored her alertness, her identical curls framing a face taut with defiance, her dark eyes burning with purpose. They were federal prosecutors, not prey, but as the clock ticked past 4 a.m. on September 29, 2025, the sisters knew their time was running out. The corrupt machine of Willow Creek was closing in, and the promised transfer to maximum security was no routine procedure. It was a death sentence. The cell doors clanged open with a jarring screech, shattering the station's eerie silence. Hank Riley's hulking figure filled the doorway, his bulldog jowls quivering with a cruel smirk, his uniform reeking of bourbon and sweat. Bud Carson loomed behind him, his mustache twitching with anticipation, a pair of zip ties dangling from his meaty hand. "Rise and shine, princesses," Hank growled, his voice thick with menace. "Time for a little road trip." Lila's heart thudded, but she caught Lena's eye, a silent signal honed since childhood. "Stay alert. Wait for the moment." "Where are you taking us?" Lena demanded, standing as Bud yanked her arms behind her back, securing the zip ties with a vicious tug. Her voice was steady, but fear flickered beneath her resolve, a primal dread of what transfer meant in the hands of these men. Hank laughed, a guttural sound that echoed off the concrete. "Somewhere nice and quiet. No fancy lawyers where you're going." He grabbed Lila's arm, his fingers digging into her bruised skin, and shoved her toward the hall. Lena stumbled beside her, their heels clicking on the linoleum, their curls swaying like dark banners of defiance. The station was a ghost town, the night guard's desk empty, the cameras suspiciously dark. The sisters were marched through a back exit into the humid pre-dawn air, where a white van idled in the shadows, its engine rumbling like a predator's growl. No markings, no plates, a vehicle built for disappearing people. Hank opened the rear doors, revealing a bare metal interior that smelled of oil and rust. "Get in," he barked, shoving Lila so hard she fell onto the cold floor, her knees scraping. Lena was pushed in after her, landing beside her with a grunt. The doors slammed shut, plunging them into near darkness, the only light a faint glow through the driver's partition. Hank took the wheel, Bud riding shotgun, their silhouettes hulking against the dashboard lights. The van lurched onto a gravel road, branches scraping the sides like skeletal fingers. "You know what your problem is?" Hank called back, his voice dripping with venom. "You thought you could waltz into our town, flashing fake badges, acting like you're better than us." Bud chuckled, twisting to leer at them. "Yeah, black girls with attitude. Time to learn your place. 6 feet under, maybe?" Lila's stomach churned, but she pressed her shoulder against Lena's, drawing strength from their bond. Her fingers brushed the bracelet, its hidden recorder still active, a lifeline if they could survive this. Lena's hand grazed hers, a childhood signal. "Be ready." The van bounced over ruts, heading deeper into the wilderness, the air growing heavy with the scent of pine and decay. Lila's mind raced, years of judo and taekwondo training from college, taken up to protect themselves in a world that often saw their skin as a target, were about to be tested. After 20 minutes, the van stopped abruptly in a clearing, surrounded by dense forest and the distant croak of frogs. Moonlight filtered through the trees, casting airy shadows. Hank yanked open the doors, his service pistol glinting in his hand. "Out!" he ordered, grabbing Lila's arm and dragging her into the mud. Bud hauled Lena out, his knife flashing as he cut her zip ties, only to shove her toward a rotting tree stump. "This is the end of the line," Bud said, his grin predatory. "Nobody finds bodies out here. Gators take care of the rest." Lila's heart pounded, but she saw the opening in Hank's drunken sway, Bud's clumsy grip. She caught Lena's eye, a split-second nod. "You're pathetic," Lila spat, her voice a deliberate taunt. "Big men with badges, scared of two women?" Hank's face reddened, his gun wavering. "Shut your mouth!" He lunged, aiming to backhand her, but Lila was ready. She ducked, her body fluid from years of training, and drove her elbow into his gut. He doubled over with a wheeze. Lena moved in sync, spinning to slam her heel into Bud's knee. He howled, his knife clattering to the ground. The sisters were a blur of motion, their curls whipping through the air like dark flames, their movements honed from countless sparring sessions. Lila grabbed Hank's wrist, twisting until the gun fell, her knee slamming into his thigh. He stumbled, cursing, but she was relentless, landing a precise strike to his jaw that sent him sprawling. Bud recovered, swinging wildly, but Lena sidestepped, her taekwondo kick catching his ribs with a sickening crack. He crumpled, gasping. Lila retrieved her phone from Hank's pocket, missed in their sloppy pat-down, and activated a DOJ-secured livestream app. The tiny screen lit up, broadcasting to federal servers and public platforms. "Smile, Hank," she said coldly, aiming the camera at his dazed face. "You're live to the world." Hank's eyes widened, blood trickling from his lip. "You're bluffing," he roared, lunging again, but Lena's spinning kick caught his temple, dropping him to his knees. "Tell them," Lena demanded, her voice fierce. "Tell them about the bribes, the setups, the lives you've ruined." Hank, dazed and cornered, spat out. "We were paid to clean out your kind. Wade, the cartel, even your boss, Lang. They all wanted you gone." The words streamed live, a confession that would echo across newsrooms. Bud stirred, but Lila's foot pinned his wrist. "Stay down," she warned, her voice a blade. The sisters stood tall, their curls catching the moonlight, their strength unyielding. Sirens wailed in the distance, FBI tactical teams alerted by the stream. Hank's face paled as he realized his empire was crumbling. Lila and Lena embraced, tears mixing with sweat, their hearts pounding with exhilaration and relief. They'd turned the hunters into prey, and the world was watching. The dawn broke over Willow Creek with a fiery glow, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, as if nature itself celebrated the fall of a corrupt empire. Lila Johnson stood at the steps of the federal courthouse, her radiant brown skin catching the morning light, her long black curls swaying freely, their wavy ends dancing in the gentle breeze. Beside her, Lena mirrored her poise, their identical beauty a beacon of resilience after a night that had tested their souls. They were still in their torn suits from that fateful traffic stop, bruises blooming on their wrists, but their heads were high, their eyes alight with the quiet triumph of survivors. The sisters, federal prosecutors who had turned a racist ambush into a reckoning, now faced a town transformed by their courage. The streets buzzed with activity as black SUVs and tactical units swarmed the Willow Creek police station, their flashing lights a stark contrast to the brick building's faded facade. News vans lined the sidewalks, cameras rolling as reporters shouted questions into the humid air. The live stream from Lila's DOJ-secured app had gone viral overnight, Hank Riley's drunken confessions, admitting to bribes, setups, and a racist campaign to clean the town, playing on every major network. The hashtag #DoYourWillow Creek Justice trended nationwide, a rallying cry for a community long silenced by fear. Inside the station, Chief Harlan Wade sat in his office, his silver hair disheveled, his cold eyes darting to the blinds as federal agents stormed in. "Chief Harlan Wade," the lead agent barked, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations." Wade's hands trembled as cuffs snapped around his wrists, his once imposing presence reduced to a man watching his kingdom crumble. Outside, news cameras captured his walk of shame, his stoic mask cracking under the weight of exposure. Officers who had cowered under his rule now turned away, some already cutting deals with investigators to save themselves. Across town at the U.S. Attorney's field office, Victor Lang's polished world imploded. The man who had betrayed the sisters, his voice oily with self-preservation, sat rigid as internal affairs agents boxed up his files. 20 years of service, he muttered, his tie loose, his face ashen. Gone because of those twins. The agent in charge dropped a thick indictment on his desk. Gone because you sold out your badge, Lang. Conspiracy, corruption, aiding a criminal network. Lang's polished facade shattered as he was let out in cuffs. Reporters capturing his disgrace for the evening news. The man who had built his career on loyalty to power was now alone, abandoned by the system he'd served. At the county jail, Hank Riley and Bud Carson were processed into cells, their badges stripped, their uniforms replaced with orange jumpsuits. Hank's bulldog face was plastered across screens, his racist rants a national symbol of police corruption. My life's over, Bud whimpered, his mustache drooping as he sat in his cell. Should have thought of that before kidnapping federal prosecutors, the guard snapped, slamming the door. Hank sat silent, his jowls quivering, the reality of his defeat sinking in like a stone. The town's heart beat strongest outside the courthouse, where a crowd swelled from dozens to thousands. Black residents, long oppressed by Wade's regime, found their voices, their signs reading, "No more fear, and justice for Willow Creek." Mrs. Carter, mother of the delivery driver Marcus Tate, stood at the front, her eyes wet with tears. My boy lost 2 years to their lies, she told a reporter, clutching Marcus's high school diploma. The Johnson sisters gave us our lives back. Marcus, now released from the hospital, stood beside her, his bruised face a testament to the cost of truth. Judge Clarence Brooks, tall and dignified despite his age, addressed the crowd, his voice steady but heavy with decades of witnessed injustice. I sat on the federal bench for 40 years, watching this town's corruption fester. The Johnson sisters did what I couldn't. They stood up and exposed the truth. His words drew cheers, a wave of hope rippling through the crowd. Jenny Hayes, now working with the FBI's Civil Rights Division, stepped forward, her blonde hair loose, her uniform traded for civilian clothes. 17 officers indicted so far, she announced. We're rebuilding the department with community oversight. No more silence. Lila and Lena descended the courthouse steps, the crowd parting like a sea. Their torn suits and visible bruises told a story of survival, but their radiant beauty, brown skin glowing, curls bouncing, spoke of unbreakable strength. The air was electric with chants. Lila and Lena, justice now. Phones recorded their every move, signs bearing their names waving high. Lila took the podium, her voice clear and resonant, cutting through the morning heat. When those officers stopped our car, they saw 2 black women they thought they could break. They were wrong. Her words ignited roars of approval, fists raised in solidarity. Lena joined her, their shoulders touching in a bond forged through fire. This isn't just about us, she said, her voice steady but fierce. It's about every person they framed, every family they tore apart, every voice they tried to silence. We fought for you, for Marcus, for Mrs. Carter, for Willow Creek. The crowd erupted, elderly residents who'd endured segregation wiping tears, young activists chanting for change. The sisters had given them proof that power could fall, that justice, though delayed, could prevail. Jenny approached, handing Lila a tablet showing the live stream's reach. Millions of views shared across platforms, picked up by CNN, MSNBC, and local stations. You did this, Jenny said, her eyes bright with admiration. You gave us a chance to rebuild. Clarence Brooks nodded, spreading files across a table. Arrest records, bank transfers, evidence of Wade's cartel ties. This is airtight, he said. Cases are reopening. Victims are coming forward. You've changed everything. As the sun climbed higher, the sisters moved through the crowd, accepting hugs and whispered thanks. Mrs. Carter embraced them, her voice breaking. You gave us our dignity back. A young girl, no older than 10, tugged at Lena's sleeve, her eyes wide. I want to be like you when I grow up. Lena knelt, her curls brushing the girl's cheek. You already are, she whispered, her heart swelling with pride. The rally stretched into the afternoon, voices rising in plans for a new Willow Creek. A police force that protected, not prayed, a community where truth trumped power. Lila and Lena stood together, watching the crowd's hope take root. They had come to this town as prosecutors, but they left as symbols, their fight igniting a movement. As they walked to their SUV, now returned from impound, the sisters climbed in, their curls catching the breeze through open windows. The road ahead was theirs, a path paved with justice, leading to a future where no one would be silenced again. We hope the saga of Lila and Lena Johnson lit a fire in your heart, showing that courage and truth can topple even the most corrupt systems. Their fight against racism and injustice in Willow Creek isn't just a story, it's a beacon of hope, proving that no one is above justice and every voice matters. What did this tale inspire in you? Drop your thoughts below, share where you're watching from, and let us know how it moved you. Your comments fuel our mission to bring these powerful stories to life. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Your support means everything. Don't miss our next story, dropping tomorrow, where more heroes rise against the odds. Hit subscribe, share with friends, and we'll see you soon for another unforgettable tale.